Hello, and welcome to my video presentation. My name is Paul Brett. I'm a Senior Software Support Analyst supporting the Transformation Extender product from IBM. The topic for this video is Migrating ITX File-Based Flows. Feel free to reach out to me on popular social media channels at Paul Brett IBM. In this practical demonstration, I take a map that has been designed and deployed with ITX Design Studio, specifically the Integration Flow Designer, and redeploy it to the new FlowListener using the ITX Design Server web-based GUI. First, I package up the necessary artifacts into a zip. Then I import that zip into the Design Server. I design the flow on the new web-based GUI. And finally, I deploy the flow to a local ITX REST API. We will start this demonstration in the ITX 10.1.2 Integration Flow Designer, part of the Design Studio. As you can see, I have one flow designed. This flow has a map called File Backup. The input reads any file in the Project 1 subdirectory input subdirectory matching the pattern star. After transformation through the map, it writes the file to the Project 1 output subdirectory, also using the pattern star. I'm going to run my deploy script, which writes the MSL to the appropriate directory. In my ITX 10.1.2 logs directory, you can see that I have no launcher logs currently. If I start my ITX 10.1.2 launcher, some logs appear in the logs directory. If we go into the input directory, currently empty, and into the output directory, also empty. Using my command prompt, I'm going to write a string called stuff into an input file into the trigger directory. As soon as I do that, the launcher picks up the file and completely removes it, and makes the backup in the output directory as expected, and you will note that the information has been transformed into uppercase, and we see the uppercase word stuff. So, fairly simple file-based flow here, and this is what we're going to be using for showing you how to migrate from the ITX launcher to the new ITX flow-based listener. Let's stop the service before we move on to the next step. Moving on to the Design Studio, I'm going to show how to export the necessary artifacts to migrate my map into an ITX flow for the Design Server. Right-click my project, and we're going to choose Export, and we're going to pick from the list Archive File. Click Next. Now I don't want to back up everything in my project. In fact, all I want is the MMS and the MTT. That's the map source file and the type tree. I'm going to send it to a file in my Project 1 directory called project1.zip. If we bring up my Project 1 directory now, you will note that project1.zip does not exist. When I click Finish and go back to the Project 1 directory, you will note that I do have a project1.zip. The next step is to import this into Design Server. Here I am in my web browser at the ITX 10.1.2 Design Server GUI. I'm at the login screen, so the first job is to log in. This is a fresh installation, and so the only project we have is process orders. So let's import our project. I'm going to click the Import Project button. I'm going to drag in the zip file that we created just now and click the Import button here. The project imported successfully. So I click the Close button, and you will see that we have now Project 1 here. Let's look inside Project 1. You will note that I have a map called Test 1 and a schema called Generic, the two artifacts that we designed in Design Studio. What we do not currently have is a flow. So let's create the new flow. I click New. I'm going to call this Flow 1. OK. I'm going to drag onto the canvas a source node. Now this source node needs to be configured. I'm going to right click and choose Settings. I am going to use the command line. The adapter I'm going to use is File, and the command line is going to be the watch directory. So there we have a watch directory with the appropriate file mask. I'm going to click the next button. When the file is picked up and the map completes successfully, I want the file to delete, the same as it did with the launcher. On failure, I want it to roll back. Let's go with next. The schema for this watch node is just generic, and text item is the blob that we're going to use. Okay, if we right click again and choose Enable Watch, you see the pair of sunglasses appear, the same as it used to do on the Integration Flow Designer, to show that this node, once deployed, will watch for those files and trigger off the rest of this flow. Next we need a map, so I'm going to drag one of those onto the canvas. You get a little message here telling you that the node must be configured before it can be saved. So I'm going to right click and choose my map, which is Test 1. Let's save now. It says there are disconnected nodes in the flow. You cannot save, so let's click Cancel and let's connect up these nodes. I'm going to drag the output to the input. Now this is connected, we can successfully save. But the flow isn't finished. We need to add a final target node, otherwise it won't know where to write the output from the map. I'm going to right click and configure this node with settings. Again, I'm going to use the command line. I'm going to use the file-based adapter. I've put in my file mask of what to create on the output side. I click Next, Create Failure Action Rollback, Next, Schema, Generic, Type, Text Item, and we're done. Let's wire up that final node. The output of the map goes to the target, and we click Save. So the flow is complete and now just needs to be deployed. So let's go back to the home screen and into the deployment section. In the deployment section of the GUI, you will note I have one server defined. Let's look at the properties of that server. Local REST API is the name. It's a web, it's Windows. It's actually not belonging to any server group at the moment. Here's the base URL. It's got the IP address of my machine on port 8443 TX-REST. If I click the test button here, we should get a successfully connected test, which we do. Back to the main part of the deploy screen, and let's have a look at packages. I have no packages defined currently, so let's create one. I'm going to call this package 1. And from the project 1, I'm going to choose the flow 1. So that package has been defined. Now I need to deploy it to my server. I tick the package, I click on the rocket ship up here to deploy. The server I want to deploy it to is local REST API. However, before I deploy, I want to show you another couple of URLs. Here is the v2 docs URL. And as you can see, nothing is currently listed as being deployed. Here is the Open API specification Swagger page, and if we scroll down to packages, we can list all deployed packages in this part of the Swagger. I click Try It Out, I click Execute, and it tells me that no packages are currently deployed. We'll come back to these two pages in a moment. One more step before we actually deploy the flow. I want to bring up the project directory, the input watch. You will note this directory is currently empty. Let's perform the deploy now. As you can see, it has deployed successfully. I'm going to close. On the Swagger UI endpoints page, if I refresh, you can see that Flow 1 is now deployed. On the Swagger UI Open API page, if I now execute this list all deployed packages, you will see that there is one listed as deployed. In my input watch directory, there are some directories that have been created. These are to cope with rollback processing and cooperative file browsing of multiple REST APIs watching the same directory. So let's put an input file into that directory. If we go to the output directory, you can see it's currently empty, and when I execute my echo command to create a file. Input2.txt appears in the output, and as you can see, once again it has been capitalized. That's the end of my demonstration of how to migrate ITX launcher flows to the ITX REST API based flow server. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video presentation today. If you found the content interesting and informative, please hit that like button, perhaps leave a comment. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel as I release content such as this on a regular basis. Feel free to reach out to me on popular social media channels at Paul Brett IBM. Thank you.